Welcome to the Sci-Fi Evolution channel. The cage was filled with the smell of metal and damp. She stood in the middle of a dimly lit trading post where beings from all over the galaxy gathered to exchange tools, products, and various valuables. She was one of them, a young woman with sky-blue skin and long, matted blonde hair. Her body was covered with worn-out equipment that once belonged to an ancient tribe. But now it was useless. Not because she was weak, but because no one saw her worth. Its holders have tried to sell it many times, but potential buyers have turned up their noses at it. They called her broken, useless, not even worth eating. They grinned at her, mocking her silent resistance. The other prisoners were howling and begging for a chance at freedom, but she never begged. This made her dangerous in the eyes of those who were involved in such cases. They didn't need a prisoner who wouldn't break. Then, one day, a traveler arrived. He was different from others who walked around the market with arrogance, considering it a place to exercise their power. No, this man was different. His clothes were simple. A man in worn shoes, a faded jacket, and a tired expression in his eyes walked past gold, fine silk, and rare jewelry, cages filled with exotic creatures, and then stopped in front of her for the first time in ages. She lifted her eyes to look at him, and their gazes met. His expression was unreadable. Was it pity? No, maybe it was curiosity. But there was something else, something she had never seen from any customer before. It was respect. How much did he respect her? The man, a traveler, asked the merchant, a massive creature covered in scales who scoffed at the idea of paying for a useless creation with a handful of credits. I just want to pick her up. The man didn't bargain. He just threw a few credits on the table, opened the cage, and held out his hand to her. She stared at her. No one had ever offered her their hand before. She didn't trust him, but she had nothing to lose, so she reached out. Her skin touched his calloused palm, and she walked out of her prison. When they left, she felt a sense of liberation that she had never felt before. At the market, when the weight of the chains no longer weighed on her wrists, she waited for the moment when he would force her to return to another cage and claim it as his property. But he didn't do it. Instead, he led her to a ship, a battered and worn-out vessel that seemed to have seen many battles. Without a word, he motioned for her to enter. She hesitated on the threshold, wondering why. Finally, she asked, her voice hoarse from the silence. The man turned to look at her for a moment. "You deserve better than that cage," he said. It was the first time anyone had ever told her that she deserved anything. The smell of metal and engine oil inside the ship was familiar and strangely comforting. The man handed her a ration and pointed to the seat. She took it carefully, unwrapping the food with slow, deliberate movements. It had been so long since she had eaten anything other than the leftovers thrown at her feet. He sat down across from her, leaning back in his chair. "My name is Carter," he said. "And you?" She stopped talking. Her name was taken away from her when she was captured, reducing it to a simple number for sale. She barely remembered him herself, and she had no choice in the matter. Carter frowned, but didn't press for further details. Instead, he said, "We'll find a way to help you." A quiet moment came between them, not a silence born of fear, but a silence born of two souls trying to see the way ahead. After a moment, she asked, "Where are we going?" Carter replied, "To a safe place where you can decide your future." She didn't understand what that meant, as she had never been given a choice before. However, as the ship began to move and the stars spread out in front of them, she experienced something new for the first time in a long time. Hope. And it filled her with fear. The sound of the ship's engines reverberated in the small cabin, a rhythmic, almost soothing sound. She sat across from Carter, watching him in silence. He was different from the others. He didn't command her, didn't treat her like a servant. Something that belonged to him, and that bothered her more than captivity had ever bothered her. Carter, her savior, finally spoke, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. She tensed, because words were always dangerous, and talking had brought her punishment before. But this time, there was no whip, no cruel laughter mocking her. Instead, there was a man watching her with a calm patience that she couldn't understand. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Carter exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "Nothing," he replied. She frowned. "It's impossible. Everyone needs something. You bought me," she pointed out, narrowing her eyes. "People don't just buy things." Carter's lips tightened into a thin line. "You weren't the thing in that cage. You were a prisoner. I got you out. That's all." She had spent her entire life waiting for a trick to reveal the cruel irony of fate. But nothing happened. He didn't demand obedience. He did not dictate her actions or words. He treated her like a person, and that scared her. What now? She wondered, because for some reason the unknown was scarier than captivity. "Now we have to decide what to do," Carter just said. "Have you ever been anywhere but that cage?" She shook her head. The universe was vast, filled with wonders and horrors. She only heard the whispers of freedom. Being able to choose where to go and what to do was a new experience. She wasn't ready for this. Carter must have sensed her hesitation, because he stood up and stretched. "We will stop at the station in a few days. You can leave if you want, or you can stay." Freedom. This concept was meaningless to her. She was always defined by what others wanted from her. A prisoner, a tool. If she wasn't any of those things, then who was she? She stared out the porthole as the stars raced by, endless and out of reach. Her fingers curled into fists as a fierce battle raged inside her. Inside, she could disappear into the void and start all over again. But who would she start over with? A nameless entity with no past or future. Or could she stay and trust him? It was the first time she had wanted to do this, and it was dangerous, almost as dangerous as the imprisonment itself. Carter didn't press for answers, letting the silence hang between them, waiting. This time, she wasn't afraid of it. She had time to decide who she wanted to become, and it was both exciting and scary. The space station loomed in the distance, a metallic colossus, a drifting presence in the cold void, its lights twinkling like distant stars. It was a place where people went to disappear. Carter steered the ship into the dock area with a practiced and almost effortless movement. She was sitting in the co-pilot's seat, her body tense, her mind in turmoil. Freedom was just beyond the gateway. After years of imprisonment, possession, and humiliation, she now had her first real opportunity to escape. She hesitated, her fingers curling in her lap, pressing into the tattered fabric of her clothes. She had no destination, no identity, no past to keep, but Carter gave her something she hadn't had in years: freedom of choice. "Are you sure about this?" asked Carter, his voice flat but gentle. He didn't look at her, keeping his eyes on the controls, as if giving her the opportunity to decide for herself. She swallowed, glancing at the station beyond the porthole. The docking bay was full of figures of all shapes and sizes. Mercenaries, merchants, wanderers. She could blend in, disappear, start all over again. But who would she become? Another nameless soul lost in the chaos. What if she doesn't belong anywhere? She whispered the words, slipping them out before she could stop them. Carter finally turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Then we'll figure it out together," she breathed, shaking her head. "Why do you care?" A shadow crossed his face, something old and haunting. "Because someone once gave it to me," she thought. "When I least expected it, something changed." She looked for deception in his face, the cruel trick she had come to expect, but it was not there. Only quiet sincerity. The airlock swung open with a hiss, and the last step to freedom was revealed in front of her. She stood up, but did not move forward. Not yet. Carter took his time. He just took his coat and walked down the ramp, mingling with the crowd. He didn't wait for her to follow him. He left the decision entirely up to her. She could run or stay. A heavy silence fell on her chest. The answer should have been simple, but nothing has ever been simple. She took a deep breath and got off the ship. The station came alive with noise, shouts, laughter, and the hum of cars. She kept her head down, her instincts urging her to be invisible. Carter moved forward without looking back, giving her the space she needed. A group of prisoners lingered near the moored transport. Their laughter was harsh and cruel. She recognized the emblem on their uniforms. Their uniforms were identical to those worn by those who kept her in the cage. Her stomach clenched and she nodded. But the truth was that she was unsure. Freedom wasn't just about escaping from a cage. It was about deciding what to do next. Looking at Carter, this peculiar man who gave her the first real choice in her life, she realized that she was not ready to leave. "I think I'll stay," she said, and for the first time in years, she meant it. The space station became her temporary home, but it was not intended for the final destination. It was a place to stop, reflect, and make a decision, and that's what she did. As the days turned into weeks, she gradually adjusted to her peculiar routine. She took on odd jobs and studied the rhythms of life without shackles. For the first time, she had an election, a real election. Carter never rushed her, never asked for anything. He was just there, a quiet presence. When she needed it, she had a reliable source of help. She spent a significant part of her life waiting for the next failure, the next act of deception. Trusting someone seemed impossible, but Carter remained steadfast. He did not make empty promises or false oaths. He just gave her the freedom to be whatever she wanted. And then one day, she discovered that she knew exactly who she wanted to be. It's about creating a path, deciding who you want to be, and not letting the past dictate your future. True strength lies not in simple survival, but in the battles we choose. Having been sold for nothing, she realized her value and would no longer allow anyone to belittle her.